fact that we do not have a firm enough background check system is something that makes us more vulnerable to these kinds of mass shootings. And you know, I do get concerned that this becomes a ritual that we go through every 3-4 months, where we have these horrific mass shootings, and yet we're not willing to take some basic actions that we know could make a difference.
And that the president yesterday, he was having a interview with Telemundo, I believe, and I think he hit it on the head. Let's be honest. When we first saw the tragedy playing out at the Navy Yards, while our heart broke for those families who lost loved ones, and there was a bit of a shock at yet again another tragedy, there's also a little bit of resignation where part of us just say, here we go again. Maybe it's not a grammar school, maybe it's a college, maybe it's in Binghamton, New York, the next one's in Arkansas, one's in a city, the next is in a suburb, the next in some rural community. The date lines change, the number of victims change, the type of victims may change, but at the end of the day, as I said before, here's the usual thing that happens. Crazy person with a lot of warning signs we learn after the fact gets their hands on a gun or guns and kills a whole lot of people, and then later on we say, my God, how could this have happened? I don't know how many times it has to happen before we have to say, there's a pattern here. And like the president said, it becomes almost ritualistic. So here's what I'd like to do. Different people, good and decent people, can have different ideas on how to answer the same question we're asking you at the bottom of the screen. And we've opened up, as you see, our phone lines right now. Toll-free lines open, so please join us if you haven't already, and we'll get to your phone calls shortly. But what I want to know is we should at least all aim for the same common goal. If 30-some-odd thousand people die every year in this country at the end of a gun, and a multiple of that are injured by guns, and we say that's not good enough for America, and we want to reduce that number, we'll never get to zero, but reduce it by a huge number. How do we do it? Let's assume we all agree that it should be a national issue. It should be a national initiative that as America, we can do better. How do we get to that point? And that's the question, in addition to whether or not there's a political will in our nation's capital to do it, that I'm asking you good folks at home tonight. I want to bring in our panel right now to sound off, and I'm joined here by two friends that sit at this table with me every night, and sadly, we've covered this story many times already, guys. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And we'll get to the phone calls in a minute. We've heard from a senator, and I believe a well-intentioned and a genuine senator. Here's a guy who on Monday, Dominic, was going to go speak on the Senate floor about Newtown. It was his state. He went to the funerals. I'm talking about Richard Blumenthal. He couldn't speak because they had to shut it down because blocks from where he was speaking was yet another mass shooting. Now, we'll get to whether or not we think Washington has the will, the political courage, or whatever else. But the public seems to want this. 90% of America wants a background check. And that's not going to solve all the problems. But what is the right solution that will make a real difference to that mom in Chicago, to some grieving person in D.C. right now, to some parent in Newtown, Connecticut? What's the thing that will make a real difference so that in a few years from now, when our kids can sit at this table, right, they'll say, well, it's a lot better than it was back in 2013.
It's real simple, Richard. We as a country must break the NRA lobby. Now, I know you said we'll deal with the politics later. I understand that. But until we break the NRA, which now has members, but also many of these gun manufacturers backing the organization, until we break that, I really don't think anything is going to change. I would have said to you under a normal circumstance, the only way it's going to change is if one of their children were affected or their members, meaning lawmakers. But we've already sadly seen that with the Arizona law, Gabby Giffords. So, I mean, we've had a congresswoman out on a campaign event on I believe it was Saturday morning, shot in the head. If that doesn't change the mentality in Washington to bring this about.
Or 20 kids at a school that could have been any town USA, and the teachers and those heartbreaking stories, and that visual, Andrew, of the little white caskets where I said it'll be different this time. And sadly, I was wrong. And in April, as we saw, the president had to all but beg just to have a vote on it. And this is what 90% of the American public behind what the administration wanted to do, and they still couldn't get it through. I understand the political hurdles, but let's just talk policy for a second. The two big things that come out of this is we need to do a better job about identifying people that have that are mental risks to themselves or to others, and two, we got to restrict the access, and maybe the way to do that is background checks. There's not a magic panacea, as I said, but what's the best way to get at the root of this?
I'm not.
How do you curb the amount of violence in this country?
I mean, to my mind, you have to take away or reduce the number of guns that are out there only because it makes it too easy to kill people or for bad people to do things with horrible consequences. I mean, you're never going to stop bad people from existing. You're never going to stop people from wanting to do bad things. So the least you can do is take away the tools that enable them to make their bad intentions into tragic moments and with tragic consequences. But I agree with Dominic. I think it's going to take more blood and more tears. We're not there. We're not going to be there for a long time. There's too many people who...
On an optimistic note, and this may be naive, but on an optimistic note, the word is in Washington that they're closer than we think, in that, not on the real stuff, but at least on the margins, on the mental background checks. And while some of the right would to be restricted only to people that are screened and considered and that have schizophrenia or whatever, that should be red flagged when they go to get a gun, there's that. But on the flip side, if you believe the senator and others, there is a growing support for a basic background check, which, by the way, I know the guys here at the table know it, but maybe the audience doesn't. The NRA themselves supported. The head of the NRA got behind the idea of a universal background check not that long ago. So, and 75% of the members of the NRA supported. So it's not an impossible hurdle to cross. It's a political one. I'm going to get to some phone calls, but there was one thing that just to me was kind of confirmed that you guys that were farther away from this. The gun dealer that sold the gun to Mr. Alexis, the shotgun that was used, he proudly said, hey, I didn't give him an AR-15 because he wasn't a Virginia resident. Now, by the way, if he lived in Virginia, he would have given him an AR-15, despite this guy being crazier than you know what. And that counts as progress today. That the guy walked out with a shotgun, but he didn't walk out with an assault weapon. And that is what we consider making real progress in this country. And to me, at least, that's a scary testament. All right, let's go to the phone lines right now. And let's start off in Dutchess County. We've got Robert on the line. Robert, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Rich, listen, there's a couple of points here. One of the main points that one of your panelists just made was the gun lobby buying Congress. Buying Congress, and the result is our kids being killed. Laws that make sense, common sense, they fight because of money. Secondly, how does a background check or a mental background check protect us from someone who gets angry? You don't have to be mentally ill to get angry. Car accident, you jump out, you may shoot someone with a firearm. Anger. How do you protect people from anger? It's the guns, Rich. Too many out there, Congress being bought off.
Thanks, Robert. Although maybe I'm being a pessimist here, but how many guns we have in circulation in this country?
I think it's about 400 million.
We have more guns in this country than we have American citizens. So to suggest that we'll cut off the gun supply in this country, maybe long term that's the answer, but I think shorter term, I think we still got to try harder to keep terrorists on terror watch lists, people that are diagnosed as obviously people mentally unstable, former felons from getting their guns back. I think there's some basic things I'd like to think as a country we can agree on. But let's go back to the phones and to Tom. Tom's calling us from Belmore in New York. Tom, thanks for waiting. Go ahead, you're on the line.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm for arming the citizens. Armed guards at schools, armed guards at movie theaters, armed guards at supermarkets. Whatever we need to do to protect our people, we have the Second Amendment right, and we should use it, and we should arm our citizens. I'm a gun owner, I'm an NRA member, and my family is perfectly safe because I own guns and I know how to use them the respectful way and the responsible way. It's the people
Tom,
who
stay on the line with me. I got a question, which is, you probably know the figures, okay? I'm not going to bore everyone with the data, but you are 10 times more likely to be killed by a loved one in your own home than you are to be killed by an intruder, or to kill an intruder trying to come in your home. Now, I believe that you're a responsible gun owner. I believe you're a trained gun owner. But you know the facts, that if we arm the lunch lady and we arm the kids at college campuses across the board, you're going to have a heck of a lot more tragedies than you are if we cut off the access to the crazy people. You really debate this point with me?
Look, I look at it this way. Everybody always, a lot of people say, oh, the only way to stop a bad guy is a good guy with a gun. Well, when something happens, who do we call? A police officer. That is a good guy with a gun. And I think that that's the way we should go. And I'm in New York. I'm not happy here, and I'm actually planning to move my family out of here to Texas so we could be a lot more free to have a lot more freedom and a lot safer.
We appreciate Tom's call and his honesty. And he's right. We do call a police officer when we're in trouble. But what happened this past weekend in Times Square?
But just think for a second about the police, though. What does a policeman have to do, Dominic? A policeman has to pass a background check. A policeman has to pass a criminal check. A policeman has to go through police training. And we'll talk about it, and I want to get diverted. They make a lot of mistakes as well. But my point is, these people, you know who they are before you strap a gun on their waistband. And they're not even perfect.
Right, but my point, let's put the qualifications to the side. The armed police officers, and what happened this past weekend. So a gun,
and
stopping a gun.
Know, 2 innocent people were caught in the crossfire as police, shot at an alleged perpetrator here, unarmed, but that's a separate story. Missed the guy completely and shot 2 unarmed people who just happened to be bystanders on the streets at Times Square.
So, Richard, I just don't subscribe to the argument that a gun can stop a gun. It just doesn't work all the time.
I feel bad for Tom, the caller who just called in. Look, the libertarian in me says, I don't want the government telling me that I can't do something just because other people can't handle it responsibly. And I'm sure that Tom is a responsible gun owner. The problem is there are way too many other people out there who aren't responsible gun owners, and the balance has shifted away from the responsible towards the irresponsible. There are people out there who are very responsible handling dynamite, but we don't make it available to everybody because of the damage that would happen with it.
Tom lost me when he said that he's planning to move him and his family to Texas, not because of a job opportunity, but because he wanted to have more freedom with guns. If we're at a point in the country where people define themselves by their guns, and that they're going to literally move halfway across America because they want to be able, like in Texas, to carry a gun into a bar. Think about that. Let's mix alcohol and firearms. Good idea. Or you've got to bring a gun into a church or into a park. You get the drift? These aren't hypotheticals. These are real things that legislators wrote into the law. Why do you need a gun in church? Why do you need a gun when you're getting liquored up? Why do you need a gun when you're taking a walk in a public park? Now you're interfering with my safety. So to me, I want Tom to call in, and I want people to disagree with me, but I want you to think, if we're defining ourselves as a country by how many places you can carry a gun and all kinds of guns, I think we got a bigger problem here. All right, when we come back, I'm going right back to the phone lines. Like Tom and like our other callers, we want to hear from you. 38766-2428. And as we go to break here, I leave with the voice of Carlos Soto. He is the brother who lost his sister during the shootings in Newtown. She, one of those heroic teachers. He also spoke on Capitol Hill today.
It still doesn't feel real, and that's why I come down here. I come down because I don't want another family to go through what I'm going through right now.